Alright, let's try to get through this next chapter and hope it's not as boring as the last one. Chapter 24. Into the Wild. It is a common misconception that the first steps of any journey are often the hardest ones to take. I'd like to call bullshit on that one, if it pleases the court. They were the easiest ones that I'd ever taken. The few days of rest I'd had in Wet Hoof before we departed were comparable to the ones I spent at the treehouse. I filled the time with familiarizing myself with our new ride, the six-wheel equestrian version of a monster truck. Booyah! Pursuing many of the maps and documents that Daring had brought back, and generally taking it easy. We hadn't decided on our name for our transport yet, although we definitely each had our own suggestions as what it should be. It went something like this. "The Intrepid," suggested Daring Do. "Spirit of Curiosity," I offered on a piece of paper. "The Hunk of Junk," Ginger muttered. "The Shag Wagon," Disarray said, with a completely straight face. I can just imagine that. Coconut was too busy laughing at that to come up with a name of his own. At a crossroad, we voted on it. You know how it is. Democracy, fair vote, equal voices, yada yada yada. Unsurprisingly, we all voted for the name we chose. Democracy at its best. All except Coconut, of course, who thought Disarray's choice was completely hilarious. Popular vote decreed that the vehicle that would carry us on our grand voyage would be called the Shag Wagon. There was much face-hoofing indeed. With the exception of 3 males of the group, Coconut, Disarray, and I, who eventually succumbed to my inner juvenile, often sniggered wildly at the idea of it scrawled across the side of the wagon. Ginger and Daring Do simply shook their heads in a mix of disbelief, pity, and loss of all faith in democracy. To make matters worse, Disarray even poofed up a vanity license plate that stated in bold I failed talking. Big, bold letters. Swag. But the A is a 4. And fused it to the rear of the wagon, where it became a permanent fixture. Needless to say, the mayors refused to let a ridiculous decision like this stand. The coup was swift and brutal. The masculine majority was overthrown by the terrifying prospect of facing the wrath of Daring's whip in the heat of Ginger's fire. It doesn't help that I folded like a deck of cards the moment Daring asked me to. That being said, afterwards it was usually the mayors who made all the decisions, and the decorative choices, and pretty much everything else. Well, mostly. The second day of rest, I found myself lounging about my room. It was highly reminiscent of a cabin on a ship, with a small mattress along one wall that folded up to make more space. The bed sheets, a pale blue, had been torn up into long strips by yours truly, and wrapped tightly around my forearms like bandages. They covered the burns well enough, thank goodness. I felt like a monster every time I saw them. A sturdy desk took up the opposing wall, and I fell in love with it immediately. The other 2 walls were covered in bookshelves. However, most of them were empty. A few books were present, though, like a tome about the 3 pony species, another book about the subject of magic, and another providing a rough description of some Equestria's regions. Oh, he should gang up with Twilight. It was the tome of magic that I was reading, leaning back in a chair at my desk and thoughtfully holding a short rod of quartz in my mouth like a lollipop, when Daring knocked on the door. I let loose a 2-toned whistle, indicating that I had heard, and she was all clear, and set the book down. I had been researching spells or enchantments that might have a way of granting me some communication skills. No luck yet. Daring almost skipped into the room. The last few days she'd been spending hunting around Wet Hoof for supplies and the like. The effect was akin to a shopping spree for the average human female. Except Daring was shopping for ice axes, explosives, rope torches, and rations. She was like Lara Croft in a pony's body. Sexy. "Hey, Echo," she sang, holding out something with a wing. "Look what I found." I watched her with interest as I switched my quartz pop over to the side of my mouth. It tasted like butterscotch. Daring tossed the object over to me. I leaned backwards and caught it in one paw. It appeared to be a scroll of some sort, much wider than what I'd imagined. I unraveled it on top of my desk and smiled broadly as greens and blues and browns rang up at me. It was a map containing the entirety of Equestria. There were a lot of blank spaces. If we're going to see it all, we need a plan, Daring said as she stood behind me, resting her chin on my shoulder to look down at the map. And since this is all your idea, I think that responsibility falls to you. She had a good point. We had a method of transportation, but no clear idea of where we were going, and Equestria was vast. I misstated it had to have the same landmass as Australia back on Earth. Hell, it even looked a little like Australia, rotated 90 degrees clockwise. Huh. Daring's maps not only showed me that, but some of the surrounding land as well. In the southeast bulge was the great southern rainforest, where we currently were, flanked by mountain borders to the east and south. There was only one marked town in the entire huge region, and that was a city called Rio de Janeiro, much farther to the west, where the rainforest began to thin out. Along the inwardly curving eastern border of the land was a great desert. I picked out a few cities here, with names like Dodge, Junction, Hooverville, and drumroll please, Appaloosa. Nothing more than a speck away, out in the middle of nowhere. Surprisingly, it was the closest one to us. Farther out into the sands was another country called Saddle Arabia. The northern reaches of Equestria were rolling plains and temperatures, scraggly forests, bush country really. The northern border was made of pure mountains, the Himalayas, highest mountains in Equestria. Beyond them lay the Griffin territories, as well as a scattering of diamond duck packs that called the place home. To the west lay the sea, sealed up by rocky, coastal scrubs and small dry woods, but that wasn't what earned my attention in the area. No, what pricked my interest was the fact that there was a name of a country printed into the surface of the ocean, Atlantis to be precise. Sea ponies are cannon, bitches, I smugly thought to myself. I dug into my belt and removed my claw. That was actually funny. Spinning it around my fingers for a few seconds before placing it down in the center of the rainforest. Lightly I began to trace a large counterclockwise spiral around the map, following the borders first, then slowly circling inwards to the very center of Equestria, where the three names rested in a rough triangle. Cloudsdale, Canterlot, and Ponyville. The end of my journey, and after that, well, I'd cross the bridge when I came to it. I don't know what happened to the claw, but Ginger must have baked it so hard that it turned somewhat flaky. As a result, it could be used as a sort of marker or pencil. Go figure. Daring murmured over my shoulder. Not a bad plan. We'll cover pretty much everything in a couple of years, and the actual path won't deviate too much from the line. Any reason you want to go here first? She tapped to the eastern desert region with the hoof. I flipped over an edge of the map over to write apples. The Appaloosan apples, to be precise. That, and I'd always want to go to the Wild West sort of place. I visited the American West a few times, but there wasn't exactly much frontier in a country that stretches from sea to shining sea. Yeah. Besides, I'd always wanted to meet some of the Applejack's extended family. Apples? Daring asked. I nodded resolutely. It screamed inside my head. Applejack is best pony! I was totally not biased. I might have been saving Ponyville for last, but that didn't mean I couldn't meet some of the other well-known stars of the show along the way. Starting with the best ones, of course. Well, if we've got the route estimated, then put the compass down on it, and she'll take us where we need to go. I gave her a confused look. The compass? Oh, right. I gently looped it off my neck and set it down on the map. Daring reached over and flipped it open, but kept the hoof on the edge of it. Her face scrunched up for a moment in concentration. I watched in disbelief as the needle immediately ceased its rapid spinning, as if held by some mysterious force. Slowly, the needle slid off to the east. Daring took her hoof on it and smirked. Like it? It's called a homeward rose. Might not point north, but she'll get you where you want to go. Just think of a place, and hey presto! Of course it only works for places you've already been. She paused for a moment, scratching her head with the hoof. Not exactly the most useful thing on a journey to unexplored territory, but it'll guide us to a general area, and from there we use my compass. I cocked an eyebrow at her as I picked up the homeward rose from the map. Upon contact, the needle began to spin again. Daring smirked as she turned to my side and flicked her tail against my cutie mark. It's just one of the many notable talents of yours truly, she said proudly. I don't get lost. I gave her a flat look. I just take the scenic route from time to time, she finished somewhat lamely. Now then, I think it's time we get you out of this stuffy room of yours. You've been poring over these books for the last couple of days. I think it's time you actually came outside and got to the epilogue, goddammit. Pouting, I spun in my chair to take the Tome of Magic off the shelf, before presenting it to her. She blew some dust off the cover before opening its faded pages. Wedged in between the sheets were scores of notes I'd taken on certain things. I'd read a good half of the thing so far, and had just gotten to a section containing some spells used by the legendary Swarful the Bearded. Daring took out a few of the papers and laid them down over a map. Huh, so you've been trying to find a new method of communication with magic? At my nod, she continued glancing through them. I'm sure there's a spell in here that could solve this, but tonight is our last night in Wet Hoof Echo. Let's make it special, yeah? I twirled the claw on my fingers for a few seconds before scrawling, "What do you have in mind?" and slipping it into the wrappings on my left arm. She grinned. Forworn hearts came to me on the faint summer breeze, hooves dirtied, and manes all awry. I said, "Hey, come and stay!" So for a night and day, 4 hearts found a safe place to lie. My tavern is warm, and the bed's so much more, so sit, and please drink for a spell. I've got stories of plunder, and laughter like thunder is ringing this tavern quite well. Hey, yo, life's full of whimsy, hey, yo, so's best gets tipsy, 'cause we're sure it'd make more sense if you're drunk up to your eyeballs and slamming through the drywalls. Put it on my tab, will be my recompense. The tavern swam before my eyes in a haze, a pleasant warmth fueling a furnace in my gut. Coconut and Disarray stood on the bar with the bartender, all 3 of them, blindingly drunk and staggering as they roared out the next verse of the ballad. It was a riot of noise, a soft laughed, and I was reminded of several pubs I'd frequented when I spent time in London. Rock cider, they called it. Cider that's hard as rock, to be more precise. It seemed to be the only thing with enough punch to get me drunk. And damn did I have a lot of it! Woo-hoo-hoo! I happily swayed to the tune on my seat. A small mountain of empty stains spread out before me on a countertop. Ginger sat to my right, nursing a glass of some evil-looking beverage. You know, she said slowly, her eyes somewhat unfocused, that guy knows how to carry a tune. I said tune. Where he'd even learn a shing like that? She pointed at Coconut, who was in the middle of doing a shockingly good version of the can-can some distance away, kicking bottles and glasses awake. I shrugged before slamming another empty stein down onto the counter and popping my rod of quartz back in. "Oh, wait, here. Let me get that for you," Ginger mumbled, as her horn flickered to life, eyes narrowing on the end of my delicious gemstone. Whoosh! A thin lance of green fire zipped in front of my face, continuing to strike the far wall in small explosions of sparks and smoke. Nearby ponies cheered vigorously. Glancing down, I noticed the end of my quartz was on fire, much like a cigar. How is that even? I began thinking before cutting it off. You know what? Screw it. I'll go with the flow. I took a tentative puff on my mineral cigar. Butterscotch tasting smoke slid over my taste buds. A perfect ring issued forth as I exhaled a puff of pale vapor. That'd be so, poisonous to the other ponies. Don't do that. No. Grinning, I lifted a fresh stein in the air at Ginger. She lifted her own glass as they met with a clink. Cheers! Ginger took a deep pull while I simply drained the entire thing in one go. That's some good motherfucking cider right there. Disarray plopped down into the seat next to me, cracking some joke or another that made Ginger's drink come right out her nose. I forgot what it was, but it didn't matter. There was just too much happy to go around. Everything sort of went comfortably blurry at that point, and I simply basked in like the afterglow of a long night's loving. Somehow I ended up across the tavern, where a small crowd had gathered. I found Daring Do matched up against a swarthy green unicorn, surrounded by a bunch of onlookers. They were playing horseshoes? They were marked different, though. The small posts one would throw the shoes around were sticking straight out from the wall. There were 4 arranged in a rough triangle, with a smaller post in the center of the shape. I watched as the green stallion tossed his over end until it clanged on the post, one of the larger horseshoes. His horseshoe, colored blue, knocked off a red one that had already been hanging there. "Ha!" Daring laughed. "Beat that!" The explorer saw me pushing through the crowd to the front. "Hey, Echo!" She sashayed over and leaned up to me. "There you are! Say, you think you could hold my drink for a second? Teacher's got a class to teach. This fool needs to get schooled." I took her drink in a paw, some of that blue wine I'd seen a while ago. She gave me a wink and waltzed back over to the stallion. Was it just me, or was she swaying her hips a little? She produced a blue horseshoe and spun it around her foreleg for a moment, thinking hard. "What's the matter?" asked the stallion. "Can't think of a way to win. That's it." Daring smirked. "Nah, just figuring out how many points I'll be leading by." "Oh, and how many will that be?" "Dunno. Depends on whether or not this is against the rules. With that, the mare removed her pith helmet and tossed the horseshoe inside. One smooth movement, she gripped the helmet with one hoof and pulled the brim back with her teeth, stretching it taut like a bowstring. "What if?" she muffled through the helmet. Aside from Daring, I was the only one who knew what was coming next. I hit the deck like I was on fire. "Stop, drop, and roll, bitches." Flang! The helmet launched almost as fast as the eye could see, in the opposite direction. Ping! It bounced off the rim of a drinking trough. Swoosh! Straight through the mane of some unwary mare, somehow shaving her down to a stubble. Clonk! I knocked Coconut, still singing, off the bar. Fwhip! Ricocheted from the ceiling corner. Crash! And promptly went out a window. The stallion burst out laughing, as did most of the crowd. He good-naturedly clapped her on the back. "Good try, lass. Good try." I peeked out from where I'd been cowering on the floor, finding where I'd dropped my cigar to stick it back in my mouth for another sweet puff. "Wait for it," said Daring. Whatever the stallion was going to say next would forever be lost to the annals of time. A streak burst through the window on the opposite side of the building it had left, impacting right in the middle of the array of posts. When the dust settled, there was Daring's hat, resting perfectly from the center peg. She casually strode over to it and flipped it off its resting place to her head, revealing the blue horseshoe hanging perfectly underneath. There's absolute, thunderously booming silence. Disarray, sitting back in a bar stool, slowly began to clap. "Now that's a spicy meatball." That broke the dam, and soon the entire Avern was rocking with cheers. The Pegasus was swarmed with admirers and congratulatory back-thumpings. Ever the gracious winner, Daring shook her hooves with the unicorn, and even offered a few words of advice. Through the dull roar of the tavern, I could not hear them. Then she was standing in front of me, yelling something over the noise. I put a paw— "Just get to shipping already! This is boring!" I put a paw to my ear and bent down to listen. "It's getting in pretty crazy in here. Want some air?" "Thank you, Daring." At my enthusiastic nod, she grabbed me with a hoof and hustled me through the press into her room. No, I barely had enough time to extinguish my cigar and stick it into my wrappings. Ever seen a diamond dog used as a battering ram? It's freaking hysterical. I felt the breeze hit my face the moment we managed to squeeze through the door. I remember leaving my duster in the shag wagon, which suddenly I was glad I did. It was well past sunset now, the last remnants of the day bleeding out from behind the horizon. Wethoof was thronging with ponies, and through my pleasant buzz, I briefly thought I was looking at a kaleidoscope. We made our way past the outskirts of Wethoof's wooden lily pads. The pavilion was still set up in the field where was the memorial. A few ponies were sitting in the grass, rustic instruments beside them as they looked over the sheets of music. Traveling musicians, maybe. It was at that moment I was struck by a crazy idea. Whether it was the prodigious amounts of liquor flowing through my veins, giving me courage, or the sheer perfection of the situation, I'll never know. I released myself from Daring's grasp, and extended a finger, indicating that she could wait there for a moment. I approached the musicians, and gave a deep bow of greeting. One of them, a russet-colored pony earth mare thingy, spoke up. "Hello there, can we help you with something?" I removed the cloth from where I'd kept it in my wrappings and took a blank sheet of paper. Music thingy. "What's he doing?" asked one of the musicians. "I think this must be the mute we heard about from the locals," said the first one. "I heard he writes instead of speaking. Let's see what he's doing." They crowded around what I had been scrawling on the paper. "Oh no, oh ho, this is interesting. Flat sharp, look at this." "I was wondering if I could ask you to play something for me," I quickly wrote as they looked on. "For my friend over here." "Your friend, eh?" The russet mare looked over to where Daring was standing, awkwardly scuffing a hoof on the ground. "Huh." One of the others picked up something that looked like a harp and a guitar put together. Somehow, without any fingers whatsoever, he plucked a few precise notes that rang crystal clear. "I think we can do something for you. Go get her, dog." "With pleasure." I bounded over to Daring and swept her up over one shoulder. "Whoa, Echo, what's going on?" That was as far as she got before I took a mighty leap and sailed right up to the pavilion and swung her off into a graceful spin. I heard something behind me whisper my name. I glanced back to see Disarray and Coconut peering over the edge of the pavilion. "Oi, Fluffy, it's dangerous to go alone. Take one of these." "Ha ha," Disarray hissed. Coconut threw a rose at me, which I caught in my teeth. Oh no, that was Disarray talking. That's weird. Before giving them the thumbs up, they vanished from view like a pair of evil gophers. I spun back around to Daring, rose in grinning mouth, and struck a dancing pose the exact instant the music began to play, and this is that music, apparently. Okay. Yep, I had had way too much to drink. Daring, unbelievably, simply laughed and struck a pose of her own. An eyebrow arched as she tossed her hat aside. Bold, very bold, I like it. And then we danced, the spicy rhythm setting my heartbeat jumping out of my chest as we spun across the sunlit stage and met Pa and Hoof. Any fool daring to call himself a gentleman must learn how to dance. Tango, salsa, bachata, mambo, salsa. They fit the music perfectly. I was no ballroom master, but damn it, I'd dropped more than a few jams when the time called for it. I met her steps with one of my own, rusty but still skilled. A few moves I've always been troubled by. I spot them coming a mile away, almost matching her pace for pace, a second shadow. She suddenly spun back into me, and I instinctively bent her over in a dip. I was pleasantly astonished to see that Rose was in her mouth now. When did that happen? She bent farther over and flipped out of the dip. Still grasping a hoof, I pulled her down and whipped her through my legs. A powerful gust of air sounded as she vaulted off the stage and pressed herself to me. Back to back. We stared like that for a split second, and then the dance continued. It was almost like she was playing with fire in a way. She was wild and free, and I didn't so much as lead her as I did point her in the right direction, and watch as she worked a different kind of magic. I could respect that. Some men lead, some follow. I preferred to go side by side. She was whirling at a dervish. What? Dervish of movement, using her wings just as much as I used my paws, morphing the moves into a mind-bending aerial twists and spins. We swayed and swooned and leaped and kicked through the final moments of daylight, beating out a furious staccato on the wooden planking as if it were an instrument itself. Let's epilogue already. Although I held the dominant position, she was somehow guiding me as much as I did her. I didn't complain, picking up 1 minute to cue twirls around her at almost frightening speed. The world was spinning and swirling where she was, at the very center of it all, smiling and laughing, enjoying herself like it was the last day on earth. At that very moment, I realized the truth. There are moments in everyone's life they never forget. This was more than that, though. This was one that would define me. I embraced the moment. Carpe diem. The day shall be seized. I was in a haze of joy, rapture even. The way the sunlight flickered through her wild mane into those eyes, the soft rush of wind as she snapped her wings to and fro was all I could see. There was no formula for what we did, no guide. It was deeper than that, something else guiding our steps. I can never remember being any happier at that instant. And it was all thanks to the beautiful mare dancing beside me. She pirouetted swiftly and fell back as the music reached the final note. I twisted to catch her, cradling her in sheer paws. Or I would have, had we not danced too close to the edge. In a tangle of furs and feathers, we tumbled over the side and crashed to the ground with a powerful whump. I wheezed as Daring landed right on top of my stomach, the rose flying out of her mouth. As I caught my breath, I suddenly became aware of her position and fell still. Daring sensed it as well, and looking down from where she was lying over my chest, laughed gently. I reached up and wrapped my arms around her, careful not to pin her fluttering wings. My entire world shrank to those two breathtaking eyes, that flushed face, that small, cocky smile. I moved first. Our lips met as the moon crested the horizon. I closed my eyes as sparks flew in my brain, wild jolts of happiness and warmth. My chest burst with fireworks as the universe faded away, to leave the perfect sensation of her soft mouth against mine, her tongue delicately teasing my own. Her hooves came down and rested against my sides of my neck, caressing me. I could feel her heart beating, almost matching me, beat for wild beat. I opened my eyes and slowly pulled away. Face flushed, eyes flickering. It took you long enough to work up the guts, she said softly. I've been wanting to do this for a while. At my bashful grin, she simply laughed before diving down for another deep kiss that scrambled any coherent thoughts I'd had in my head. Through the haze of pleasure, I finally let go. No inhibitions, no worries, no right or wrong. There was only her and I needed nothing else. Nah. Well, I need the epilogue. Why you know epilogue yet? Okay. The day of our departure had arrived. We left early in the morning, or as early as we could manage to get up, due to the fact that we all had whopping hangovers. And I was rather enjoying sleeping and dozing comfortable in the cabin across from my own, A tannish gold Pegasus nestled against my side. Thank gods for the alcohol. Liquid courage, some called it. Well, it certainly worked wonders for me, aside from a splitting headache. Oh, yes. Wonders indeed. The wonderful part definitely fit the bill. If last night had been anything to go by. Of course, ever the gentleman, I had at first resisted the idea, but once Daring Do set her mind on something, she usually gets it, and I was no exception. Literally. I smiled to myself as I snuggled down into the bedding. Daring reflectively curled up against me and murmured something in her sleep. Screw that code. That was worth every damn second. As with all good things, however, the peace of the morning ended when I felt the call of nature. I gently lifted myself out of bed and crept out of the door to the common room, where I found Disarray sitting on a cushion in his Draconicus form, staring into the fading embers of the metal pyre that took up the center of the floor. See, now Koken is going to be all lonely, and he's going to go for Disarray, and that's just going to be weird. Well, 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 the walk of shame in all its glory, he said, as a flush of embarrassment crept up my face. He continued, How'd it go, Fluffy? Do you know we placed bets to see how long you two finally get together? He frowned. Coconut won, that son of a goat. So, how was it? I merely shrugged, but failed to suppress a satisfied smirk. I certainly wasn't going to be telling anyone about what happened last night. Gentleman's code of honor, and all that. Show some respect for my lady, or mare, in this case. Mare can be a lady. God, you're so racist. Disarray grinned wickedly. All right, fine. I won't press. I have one question for you. I waved a paw at him, imploring him to go on. Doggy style? I gave him a flat look. So, is that a yes or a no? Hey, get those paws away from me. Oh, Disarray. That almost made this chapter, for all its boringness. Some time later, I stood outside the shagwagon, enjoying the sunrise as it painted the sky a bright cyan. It would be the last sunrise I saw here. Might as well savor it. I took a deep breath of morning air and readjusted all my wrappings, before taking my hooded duster off a nearby wheel and slinging it on. I tensed my legs and sprang to the driver's seat, silently scrambling up onto the wagon's roof. I crossed my legs and sat down, listening to the light breeze and the distant sounds of crickets and cicadas. It's a magical world, I thought to myself. Let's go exploring! I'd been given a wonderful chance to do something tragically crueler here. I'd never asked Discord why, though. Why me? He said I was a harbinger, of change. That my very presence was significant enough to bring about shifts in Equestria. That could be a good or a bad thing, depending on what's changing. Maybe it was pointless for wondering, but I couldn't help so. There were undoubtedly others, more qualified for this. Why me? What if I were Discord? Why would I choose me? Maybe he didn't just choose just you. Now that was a very sobering thought. But even if I wasn't alone, why would I be among the few? I imagined what Discord would say about that. Why not? I pictured him saying coyly. Bah! Thinking makes my brain hurt. I pushed the debate, intending to consider it later. Instead, I simply focused on cleaning my mind on the sights and sounds and smells of a new day. Let's finish this up. I really want to watch some more Buffy the Vampire Slayer before 12 o'clock, which is in half an hour, and... My meditation was interrupted, however, when I heard the sounds of hooves on the wooden boardwalks of Wet Hoof. I opened my eyes to find that the sun had ridden a good distance, though it was still early. How long had I been occupied? I turned about to inspect the newcomers, and was greatly surprised to see who it was. Major Tithus had come a few false paces away from the wagon, flanked on either side by Duke Borealis and Duke Australius. "Good morning, Echo!" The old soldier greeted me cordially. The two Alicorns graced him murderings and greetings of their own. I hopped down from the wagon, and deeply bowed before them in return to greeting. "We have come for Disarray. He swore an oath to my lords here, and it must be upheld." "Did he now?" Huh. Borealis No, not Disarray. Disarray needs to stay. He's the one. He's my savior. He's the only entertaining thing in this fanfiction right now. Borealis stepped forward. While the prince may have renounced his role, he still owes his family some time. My sister and I included. That was Borealis, not Tithus. Australius answered in perfect timing. "He promised to return to Canterlot to see his mother and the others once again, for the first time in 2 millennium. We have missed him greatly," she said with a tinge of melancholy. "The Patchwork Prince," Tithus said quietly. "I thought him a legend. Did not believe it myself until... Until I revealed myself to you, Mayor, Disarray said, stepping out from behind Borealis, as if he had been hiding there the entire time. I could see why I faded into obscurity. Ponies do not generally think that their beloved princess could be capable of creating something like me. He clacked his lobster claws. Easier to forget a mistake than acknowledge it, eh? He laughed at that. Australia shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps, but your mother was burdened by the loss of you for nearly a century. The royal family thought you gone forever, cousin. Make no mistake. Oh, wait, no. Make no mistake. We searched high and low for you, until Celestia herself called off the searches, and at the end of her grief. 100 years may be a smaller period for those as long as we have lived. But those ponies who came and went during this time soon began to doubt that you had ever existed. But we remembered. Disarray coughed politely. Yes, memory is the key after all. I thank you for that, I suppose. Fear not, though. I intend to go with you. But make no mistake, I do not intend on staying in Canterlot. My place is here, he said, sweeping a bare arm towards the shagwagon. Or at least, until the journey ends. Mayor Tythus nodded, his face expressionless. As long as you meet with the royal family, your word is fulfilled. Pah! Words mean nothing unless you make them so. He turned to me and clapped my shoulder with the bear paw. Well then, big guy, I guess this is goodbye for now. You know, it's kind of funny. I'm sort of leaving a family to see family. At my confused expression, he leaned forward and whispered in my ear, We share the same father in a convoluted sense. He created your body from nothing, but sired me in the old-fashioned way. You're kind of like a half-brother, he grinned. Yet another royal castaway. I wonder how my mother would take, knowing that the former king had kids on the side. Don't worry, Fluffy. I'll put in a good word for you. Saw. With that, he pulled away and joined Major Tythus, shifting into his alicorn state with a flash of light. Ready, Freddy. The four of them raised their horns, the tips aglow with harsh radiance. I shielded my eyes with the paw, wincing. A sharp crack filled the air, and when I lowered my paw, they were gone. 2,000 years, and the Patchwork Prince was finally going home. Lucky bastard, I wish I could do the same, at least for a while. Huh, I was wondering when he'd leave. Ginger's voice shocked me out of staring at the place where he'd been standing. I spun around her, unleaning her spear. The spearhead was missing. Here, she said, tossing me the shaman's staff. The wood felt wonderfully in my sacred paws, even though the wrapping. I rubbed the top with a finger, feeling just the disfigured ripples where the arcanite blade has once been. I don't care what the other dogs do. I'm not a dog, and this is a new pack, so I will lead it in a new way, starting with this, she stated. Ginger turned a bit, and I could see the former spearhead sticking out of the short scabbard over her side, a small wooden handle replacing the staff. I'd start learning how to use the thing, Echo. A beta is more than just a deputy position. I gave her the finger. What does that even mean? She asked. You do it all the time. Pause. I struck a salute. So it's a sign of respect or something? Yeah, sure. I nodded earnestly. I could have some fun with this. Maybe she'd make it our official salute or something like that. I imagined a huge pack of diamond dogs standing at attention at the princess, making a rousing speech up on a podium, Ginger and I by her side, and the closing hundreds of middle fingers were raised in respect and admiration. Priceless! Ginger snorted and tossed her mane as she strode away to the wagon entrance. I don't know what you're chuckling about, but knock it off. Come on, it's time we leave. Damn straight! Where's the epilogue? The former gate to Wedhoof passed by overhead as we made our way to the thick plains that covered the former wasteland. I padded slowly alongside the wagon while Daring perched atop the driver's seat, keeping out a pie over the land. Coconut lumbered in his harness, pulling the wagon without too much trouble. Ginger Snap trotted ahead, having volunteered to scout the path to make sure our way was clear. Being fully outfitted felt surprisingly comfortable. The hood pulled over my face to shield the sun, duster hugging my fur. It was light and airy, as spider silk tends to be, but had the strength of teal. The wrappings around my wrists were a soothing presence. I noted somewhat grimly how much I preferred to keep the scars covered. Over the wraps were the braces and thick dents, my protection only by size very careful. Sharp rear claws and teeth, and a staff strapped to my back. The day was still young. In the distance I could see the sound of birds. The rainforest beckoned, drawing me closer. What sights would we see? Who would we meet? Where would we go? The forest gave no answers. But you know what will? The epilogue! But a stiff breeze rustled the leaves of the mighty trees, nature's soft sigh. Beyond lay Equestria, in all its glory. A new world, ripe for discovery, and new stories to be written. I glanced around again at the ponies who had chosen to embark alongside me. For better or for worse, we had common aims. I looked at Coconut. To spread cheer. Ginger turned back to us before continuing forward. To redeem. I observed my paws as they struck into the ground with a steady rhythm. To change. Finally, I watched Daring do as she relaxed in her seat, eagerly watching the world pass by, to have one last adventure. We were bound for greatness, to become legends in our own rights. I grinned to myself, having picked up the pace. It's a magical world. Let's go exploring. Ah! 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 So boring! Oh! I can see why I stayed up and played Team Fortress 2 and watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer instead of reading this. My sister has a confused look on her face. It's pretty funny. She's playing Minecraft.
I didn't make you do it.
Yeah, it's still funny, your face, though. That sounded kind of weird. Goodbye.